Billionaire CEO left his pregnant wife for a secretary years later. She returns with triplets. He left her in the rain, but her return with $1 billion secret changed everything. He left her standing barefoot in the rain, one hand on her belly, the other reaching for a man who had already let go. A check, a suitcase, and the last thing he ever said to her, "You'll never be more than this, a distraction." 12 years later, she walked into his boardroom, wearing power instead of perfume, holding the hand of the son he never wanted to meet, and she said only one thing: "Let's talk terms." But this story isn't about revenge. It's about rising when no one thinks you can. The night she was left in the rain wasn't heavy, but it was cold, the kind that seeps through fabric and memory. It fell in thin, quiet lines against the back alley of the Hotel Viceroy, where discarded linen carts sat beside luxury town cars. Emma Carter stood there, silent, soaked. One hand rested instinctively on her belly, a belly that had begun to round. She had just crossed into her second trimester. She hadn't told anyone yet, except Julian. Now, she wished she hadn't. The hotel door clicked shut behind him. Julian Blackwell, tall, tailored, untouchable, didn't even look back. His jaw was sharp under the amber light, the same light that had once warmed her nights in his penthouse. That night, it made him look like stone. He adjusted his cufflinks like it was just another business meeting, finished. Then he handed her a folded check. "Take this." "Emma, it's enough. More than enough." Her hands trembled as she took it. She hadn't even looked at the number yet. She just stared at his face, trying to recognize the man who once whispered, "I can't imagine a future without you," into her skin. Her voice cracked. "What about the baby?" Julian didn't flinch. He didn't blink. "What about my future?" His words fell like ice. "You want me to give up everything I've built for that?" Emma's stomach twisted, not from the child, but from the cruelty. "You helped create that." She whispered. Julian glanced away, like the truth annoyed him. "It was a mistake, a misstep. You'll land on your feet. You're smart. You'll figure it out." She did look at the check then. $100. The price of disappearing. Behind him, Caroline waited by the valet stand. Her dress clung to her like plastic wrap, hair flawless despite the rain. She didn't even pretend not to watch. Emma pressed the check back into Julian's hand. "You think money will erase this?" Julian didn't answer. He just turned toward the waiting car, his voice colder than the air. "Don't make this harder than it already is." Harder? She watched the man she loved, the man who once traced her dreams across her collarbone, step into the back seat and drive away. No apology, no goodbye, no name for the child that now kicked softly under her ribs. Emma stood frozen until the taillights disappeared. The rain soaked through her coat, her shoes, her soul. She pulled her suitcase from beside the trash bins and turned into the dark. Not to chase him, not to plead, only to survive. But as she walked, each step heavier than the last, she made a silent vow in the back of her throat: "You'll never say my name again." Without regret. Chapter 1. The rain that took everything. The rain didn't let up. By the time Emma reached the end of the block, her suitcase wheels caught in a crack on the sidewalk and tipped sideways, sending her bag tumbling into a shallow puddle. She didn't scream, didn't even flinch, just stood there and watched it soak. Her hands had stopped shaking. That scared her more than anything. Shock makes you numb. Her mother used to say that after her father left, the shaking is just your soul catching up to the pain. Emma reached down slowly, cradling her stomach with one arm and pulling the suitcase upright with the other. One wheel was broken. It didn't matter. She had no destination, no keys, no home, only the name of a women's shelter a former classmate had once mentioned. scrawled on the back of a napkin, now crumpled in her coat pocket. She passed lit windows of luxury restaurants still bustling with laughter. The people inside didn't look at her. Pregnant woman, drenched coat, mud-splashed jeans. In this part of Chicago, she was the kind of person they lowered the blinds for. On the corner of Wabash and 9th Mainalasier, Coryston 9th, her legs finally gave out. She sat on the steps of a church, St. Adelaide's, and leaned her head against the cold iron railing. Her baby shifted inside her, not kicking, just pressing. A silent presence, still so small, so impossibly real. Tears didn't come, but a sound did. A door creaked open behind her. Soft footsteps on stone. "Ma'am," a voice said gently. Southern, worn. "You all right out here?" Emma looked up to see a man in janitor's coveralls, probably in his 60s, with a mop in one hand and kindness in his eyes. She tried to speak, but only managed a nod. He stepped closer, looking at her soaked coat. Her belly, the muddy suitcase. "Come on, let's get you inside before you catch pneumonia." She hesitated, then followed. Inside, the church was quiet and warm, smelled faintly of lemon oil and melted wax. The stained glass windows threw soft colors on the floor. But it was the wooden pews that made her want to cry. They looked like they belonged to people with answers. Emma didn't have any, not anymore. The janitor handed her a blanket from the lost and found bin and motioned to the front pew. "You can rest here tonight. Father Tim won't mind." He paused, then added, "Name's Henry. You need anything? I'm mopping the hall." Emma nodded, barely able to whisper, "Thank you." When he disappeared down the corridor, Emma sat. Her coat still dripped quietly onto the floor. Her hair clung to her cheeks like seaweed, but her baby shifted again, and for a moment, Emma allowed herself to close her eyes. Julian's voice lived behind her eyelids. "You're too soft. That's your problem. Always feeling too much. You're going to ruin me with all your hopes." She had believed him when he said he wanted a family. Believed him when he asked her to move in. Believed him when he laughed in bed one night and said, "If we ever had a kid, he'd have your eyes." Poor thing. Now she was here, in a stranger's church, holding that child inside her, while the man who made him toasted champagne with someone else. She hadn't cried until now. But as the silence grew thick around her, and the baby turned again, as if seeking a comfort she didn't have, Emma let her tears fall. It wasn't self-pity, it was grief, for the version of her life she'd been building. Her career had once mattered. She'd graduated top of her class in urban planning. She had big dreams, clean, green spaces for families who never had parks growing up. But when Julian said he needed her, she believed being beside him meant being part of something bigger. Funny how part of something turned out to mean easy to replace. She sat like that for hours, head bent forward, fingers absently tracing the cross-hatched grain of the pew wood. At 3, "See ya, Em." A soft flutter, unmistakable, made her eyes widen. It wasn't just pressure. It was her baby's first real kick. A tiny nudge, like a heartbeat outside her own. A quiet voice saying, "I'm here, Mom." Emma let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. And then, for the first time since Julian had left her standing in the rain, Emma Carter smiled. Not for him, not for her past, but for what was coming, for the life tiny, real, and brave, growing inside her. The rain had taken everything, except him. And from now on, she would rise for the both of them. Chapter 2. Shelter, scars, and starting again. The next morning broke with a pale gray sky and the sharp smell of rain-soaked pavement. Chicago's spring was never soft. It woke you like a slap in the ribs, reminding you had work to do. Pain or not, Emma woke stiff, wrapped in the church's scratchy blanket, the pew's wooden edge having etched itself into her side. But her first instinct wasn't discomfort, it was protection. She reached for her belly, rubbing gentle circles just below her ribs. A soft flutter answered back. Her child, still with her, still holding on. A moment later, Henry reappeared, balancing a styrofoam cup and a small paper bag. Brought you some coffee and a bagel from the corner shop. It's not much, but it'll hold you over till we figure something out. Emma sat up slowly, blinking at him. She hadn't asked for help, and yet here it was plain. Practical kindness, no strings attached. Thank you, she whispered, the words thick in her throat. Henry nodded toward her belly. You far along? 4 months, she said softly. I just found out it's a boy. Henry smiled, something sad flickering in his eyes. Boys make you strong, even before they're born. He didn't ask about the father. Maybe he didn't have to. By noon, Henry had made a few calls. There was a shelter across town, St. Bridget's Home for Women and Children, a transitional place run by nuns and volunteers. No space, officially, but he said he knew someone. He walked Emma to the train station himself, buying her a transit card and slipping a granola bar into her coat pocket like a father might. Before they parted, he handed her a folded envelope. Inside, $60, just in case. Henry, I can't. Yes, you can, he interrupted gently. One day, you'll pay it forward. She didn't hug him. Somehow, that made it feel even more sacred. The train ride to the south side was quiet. No one made eye contact. Emma kept her head down, her hands resting on the rise of her belly like an anchor. When she arrived at St. Bridget's, the sign was small, half faded, and nailed crooked to the side of an old brick building. But when she stepped inside, something strange happened. She exhaled. The air smelled of lemon cleaner and warm pasta. Kids' laughter echoed faintly from down the hall. And behind the desk, a tall, broad-shouldered nun with kind eyes and a buzzed haircut looked up from her clipboard. You must be Emma Carter, she said. I'm Sister Ray. Henry called this morning. Said you'd need a place to land. Emma opened her mouth, unsure what to say. Sister Ray waved her hand. You don't have to explain. We've all landed hard before. She leaned in, voice softening. What matters is that you're here now, and that you're still standing. Emma blinked fast, but the tears came anyway. Her room was small, clean, mostly. A twin bed, a metal shelf, a chipped desk with an old reading lamp. The window stuck shut, and the heater hissed like it was trying to breathe through asthma, but it was hers. Sister Ray left her with fresh linens, a towel, and a schedule for meals and chores. We all carry our share here, she said, but we carry it together. That night, Emma lay on the thin mattress and stared at the water stain on the ceiling. The ache in her back was deep. Her feet were swollen, her chest tight, but her baby was still moving. And for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't broken, just bruised. The days blurred into routine. Emma helped serve breakfast at 6 a.m., scrubbed hallways at noon, and took evening turns watching the younger kids, while the other mothers met with counselors. She didn't talk much, but she listened. She learned that most of the women here weren't lazy or reckless, just tired, just discarded, just trying to stitch themselves back together with whatever dignity hadn't been torn from them yet. There was Maria, who left an abusive husband with only a diaper bag and 2 toddlers. Chantel, who used to be an accountant before her cancer came back and took her job. Even Sister Ray had once been someone else, a foster kid, a fighter, a woman who'd seen enough to believe in second chances without asking why you needed one. One afternoon, as Emma was mopping the floor near the recreation room, she spotted a child's drawing taped to the wall. Crayon and pencil, shaky lines, but thoughtful structure. It was a sketch of a house small, square, But clever, Emma smiled. And then, without thinking, she picked up a crayon and started to adjust the layout, added a ramp, moved the entrance, shifted windows for sunlight angles. By the time she stepped back, it was something else entirely, a tiny, efficient, beautiful home. She didn't notice Sister Ray watching from the hallway. That night, after dinner, Ray found her sitting alone near the laundry machines. She held out the drawing. "This yours?" Emma blushed. "I was just doodling." "Well, your doodle made a 9-year-old ask if she could live in that house someday." She sat beside her. "You were an architect, urban planner," Emma replied. "Almost finished my master's before I—" She hesitated. "Before life shifted." Ray nodded. "So shift it back." Emma looked at her, eyebrows raised. "How?" Sister Ray smiled. "Small but sure. Brick by brick. Baby, same way houses are built." That night, Emma opened her old laptop for the first time in months, not to search for Julian, but to search for herself. Chapter 3. Blueprints and Bottle Warmers. Some people rebuild slowly, one brick at a time. Emma Carter started with crayons and borrowed Wi-Fi. It began in the shelter's shared dining room on a rainy Wednesday. The other women were folding laundry, chatting over soft gospel music, and Emma sat off to the side, her laptop balanced between an empty bottle of baby lotion and a stack of chore rosters. She stared at the screen's login page. It had been 7 months since she'd last opened it, back when she still believed in shared Google Calendars with Julian and color-coded nursery themes. Her password still worked. That felt like a small miracle. The first file she opened was titled Community Housing Redesign, Final Draft. She had started it as a side project in grad school, trying to solve for what she called dignity scale living. Affordable, clean, safe, built with the belief that just because you're broke doesn't mean you don't deserve beauty. She hadn't looked at it since Julian's proposal. The ring had come with promises. "Let's build your dreams after I finish building mine." Now, she realized he never saw her dreams, just her silence. That night, as the shelter settled into soft hums and whispered goodnights, Emma typed. She worked in bursts, one hand massaging the base of her swollen belly, the other drawing rough sketches on a pad she'd borrowed from the shelter's lost and found bin. She researched solar panels that worked in low-light cities, flooring made from recycled bottles, modular layouts that grew as families did. At one point, Eli kicked so hard she gasped not from pain, but from surprise. "You like that one?" she whispered, smiling through her exhaustion. "Yeah, me too." Kitchen, on the east side, gets better morning light. 3 days later, Sister Ray found Emma in the library computer lab, still typing, hair tied in a messy knot, eyes glassy from hours of screen time. "You building something?" "Sweetheart." Emma nodded slowly. "I think I might be." She turned the screen. It showed a 3D mock-up of a small, beautiful structure, bright, angular, welcoming, a tiny home village, designed for women like her, with shared childcare spaces, vertical gardens, laundry that didn't require hauling 4 kids up basement steps. Sister Ray leaned in, studying the lines. Damn, she muttered, not even bothering to whisper. "That's not just a building. That's a chance." Within a week, Ray connected her with Melissa, a volunteer who used to run an architecture firm before chronic illness forced her to scale back. Melissa agreed to review Emma's plans. They met on a Sunday morning over stale coffee and microwave muffins in the church rec room. Emma brought a folder, stuffed with sketches. Melissa brought patience and quiet awe. By the 3rd page, Melissa looked up and said, "You're not just good. You're visionary." Emma blinked, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "I was told I was..." ordinary, predictable, a detour. Melissa shook her head. Men like that don't recognize futures unless they can control them. This, she tapped the blueprint. This is yours, and it matters. Still, practicality loomed. Emma was 7 months pregnant, unemployed, and relying on the kindness of strangers. But purpose, that was a form of currency too, and hers was growing. She applied for a local startup competition. The prize was $1, €0, and mentorship from city developers. She didn't expect to win, but she submitted anyway. Melissa helped fine-tune her pitch. Ray loaned her a blazer. The shelter's kids made a good luck card with stick figures and glitter. The day of the presentation, her ankles were swollen, her nerves frayed, and the baby was so low in her belly, she had to lean back to breathe. But she stood in front of the panel, 6 middle-aged men and 1 tired-looking woman, and said, "I'm not here asking for charity. I'm here offering a better way to build hope." She showed them the numbers, the layouts, the long-term ROI of community-centered design. But what they remembered was this: I was left alone, pregnant, on the sidewalk of a city that didn't want to see me. And I still found my way back to my dream. Now, I want to give others the map. When she walked out of the room, her hands were trembling, not from fear this time, from something else. Possibility. 2 days later, the email came. Subject: congratulations, Emma, you've been selected. Welcome to the Build Back Chicago Fellowship. The prize: a small grant, mentorship, a workspace downtown. Not enough to change the world, but enough to start. That night, as she cradled her belly in bed and listened to the steady breath of shelter life around her, Emma whispered through the darking, "We're not surviving anymore, Ellie. We're building." Chapter 4, Birth and Battle Lines. Emma woke to a tearing pain at 3. Seis, Emmy. At first, she thought it was just another cramp, the kind that had haunted her 3rd trimester like a thief, stealing sleep and comfort by the hour. But this time was different. This time, the pain radiated all the way down her spine and wrapped around her ribs like iron bands. She clutched the mattress, then sat up slowly. Wetness bloomed between her legs. Her water had broken. She didn't panic. She wrapped a sweatshirt around her waist, slipped her swollen feet into rubber flip-flops, and knocked on Sister Ray's door with a calm she didn't feel. Ray took one look at her and muttered, "Hell!" then grabbed her car keys. The hospital wasn't far, but the streetlights blurred through Emma's vision as the contractions grew sharper, closer, louder. They weren't just in her body. They were carving her, like they were breaking apart every old belief she'd once clung to. That love meant sacrifice. That needing someone meant weakness. That becoming a mother meant giving up her future. By the time they pulled up to the ER entrance, she couldn't walk alone. A nurse brought a wheelchair. Ray stayed long enough to sign her in, then kissed her forehead. "You've got this. I'll be in the waiting room." Emma nodded, too breathless to reply. The delivery room was bright, sterile, cold, but it was hers. And this time, she wasn't being left. She was the one doing the holding on. There was no Julian pacing with a phone, no designer suitcase of expectations. Just Emma, a team of nurses, and a quiet rhythm of deep, anchoring pain. Hours blurred. Her body split itself open like soil cracking before a seed. She cried. She screamed. She begged. But she never asked for anyone who wasn't already there. At 11, aim. The cries came, not hers. His, tiny, furious, unmistakably alive. "It's a boy," the nurse whispered, as if Emma didn't already know, as if she hadn't already spoken to him through the walls of her womb for months. They placed him on her chest, sticky and wrinkled. His fists curled like little testaments to every heartbreak she had survived. "Hi, Ellie," she breathed. voice shaking. You made it. His eyes opened slate gray, just like hers. And for one impossible moment, the world held still. The first night was brutal. Emma was exhausted, stitched and sore. But Eli was relentless. He wouldn't latch. He wouldn't sleep unless he was pressed against her heartbeat. The nurses offered to take him for a few hours, but she refused. He had spent 9 months listening to her from the inside. She would not leave him now. At 4, her phone buzzed, a number she didn't recognize. She stared at the screen, pulse spiking. Julian. Her thumb hovered. She didn't answer. Instead, she looked down at the tiny boy sleeping on her chest. She had everything she needed. They discharged her 2 days later. Back at the shelter, Ray had set up a small bassinet beside Emma's cot. The women had pooled donations for diapers and formula. Someone left a used stroller with a note that simply read, "You've got this, Mama." But the real shift came 3 weeks later. Eli was still tiny, Solitsky, full of demands she barely knew how to meet. And yet, between his cries and feedings, she returned to her blueprints. Now, she didn't just design for theory. She designed from experience. She knew what it meant to carry a child across a city with no safe place to stop. She understood the violence of silence, how rejection leaves a woman not broken, but invisible. She could design that out of a community, make a space where motherhood wasn't a penalty, where dignity wasn't a privilege, where no one had to give birth and go home to nothing. One afternoon, Sister Ray found her sketching again. Eli asleep beside her. "The contest judges want to meet you," Ray said quietly. "In person. They're considering funding your pilot village." Emma froze. "Me? Yes. You? Not some ghost of who you used to be. Not Julian's partner. You." Emma stood in front of them 2 weeks later. Eli strapped to her chest in a borrowed carrier, his tiny mouth opening in silent protest halfway through her pitch. She didn't stop. If anything, it made her bolder. This child isn't a setback. He's the reason this project exists, because no woman should have to choose between shelter and survival. No woman should be told that motherhood and innovation are incompatible. She finished the pitch with milk stains on her shirt and dark circles under her eyes. She won the grant anyway. Emma looked down at her son, sleeping against her chest, her arms exhausted, but her heart burning. "We built each other, didn't we?" she whispered. "You gave me a new name. Warrior." Chapter 5. The Man with the Empty Eyes. Emma hadn't worn heels in over a year, but tonight, as she stepped out of the rideshare onto the marble steps of the Chicago Municipal Gala, she stood tall in a second-hand navy dress that made her feel like someone she used to know. Her hair was swept into a clean bun, a small pendant necklace. Rays sat at her throat like quiet armor. Eli slept in a wrap against her chest, his tiny breath warming her collarbone. "He's your +1. Melissa had joked earlier that day, pinning Emma's pitchboard together. "He's the reason I'm here," Emma had replied, her voice calm. The gala was sleek, buzzing, a room full of sharp suits and sharper smiles. But Emma walked in with the slow, rooted confidence of someone who had known silence, who'd been overlooked so thoroughly that now, being seen, felt like fire and ice at once. She hadn't come to make friends. She'd come to unveil the first real model of her micro-village. Hearthlight, a dignified, sustainable housing concept for displaced women and single mothers. A journalist snapped a photo as she set up her booth. "That your son?" Emma nodded. "He's my why." The photographer smiled. "A woman building cities with a baby on her chest. That's something we need to see more of." She hadn't seen him. Not yet. The sound of champagne flutes and muffled jazz distracted her as she explained her floor plan to a potential investor. The woman was nodding, intrigued. when she suddenly glanced over Emma's shoulder and smiled. "Oh, ain't busy? You're with him?" she asked. Emma frowned. "With who?" The woman stepped aside, and there he was, Julian, across the room, tall, impeccably dressed, same sharp jaw, same designer watch, same habit of surveying a room like it owed him something. Only now, his eyes were different, empty, not broken, but hollow, like the wind had gotten inside his bones. Emma's lungs stopped. Eli stirred, pressing his cheek tighter against her chest. Julian hadn't changed much, and yet everything about him felt unfamiliar. His eyes caught hers, froze, and for one terrifying second, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, he made his way toward her. The room faded. Emma didn't blink. She wouldn't be the one to look away. "Emma," he said, when he finally stood before her, voice lower than she remembered, less certain. "Julian," she replied, crisp, controlled. His eyes dropped to Eli, who had begun to fuss quietly. Emma adjusted the wrap gently. "Yes, he's yours. And no, I'm not asking for anything." Julian swallowed hard. I didn't know. You left. You didn't even." Emma's laugh was soft, cold. "I didn't leave. Julian, I was left standing in your hallway with a suitcase full of baby clothes. You never unpacked." His mouth opened, closed. He looked at the booth behind her, the blueprints, the vision board, the model home. He blinked. "This is your project." Emma nodded. "Every inch." Julian looked at Eli again, something soft flickering across his face. "He's beautiful. He's strong," Emma said quietly. "He sleeps with one hand curled into a fist, like he's still fighting to be here. Maybe because he came from someone who had to fight her way back from nothing." There it was, the shame. She watched it arrive in his face, like a storm just beginning to register. "Emma, I never meant." She raised a hand. "Don't." Her voice was still gentle, but now it had steel. "You meant exactly what you did. You told me I was small, that my dreams were a burden, that motherhood would ruin everything." She gestured to the model behind her. "You were wrong." The air between them thickened with unsaid apologies. Eli whimpered. Emma instinctively rocked him. "Can I?" Julian began. "Can I hold him?" Emma looked at her son. She didn't say no, but she didn't say yes. Instead, she asked, "Why?" Julian was silent for a long time. "Because I'm starting to realize what I lost." Emma's throat tightened. She looked him in the eye, then gently kissed Eli's forehead. "You didn't just lose a child, Julian. You lost a woman who would have built the world beside you." She turned back to her booth, and I don't build backwards. That night, after the gala, Emma walked 5 blocks home, with Eli still wrapped to her chest. The stars were soft above the Chicago skyline. Her feet ached, her back burned, but her heart unbreakable. Eli stirred in his sleep as she whispered into the night. He saw us, baby, but we didn't need him to. That's the difference. Chapter 6. The funding. The fire. And Fui Proar. First brick. There are some places the world forgets. Vacant lots turned dumping grounds. Cracked sidewalks swallowed by weeds. Street corners where dreams go to die. Emma Carter chose one of those places to begin again. It was a sun-baked stretch of abandoned asphalt on 84th and State. Once a grocery store lot, then a pawnshop lot, then just nothing. The city was willing to lease it for $100 a year, so long as someone promised to care. Emma signed the papers with Eli strapped to her back and a check for $50. CO00 in her bag, her first investor grant. She'd won it with a trembling voice, a cardboard model, and the words, You don't need skyscrapers to rebuild a city. You need shelter with soul. She named the first structure Mercy. It wasn't even a house yet, just a foundation trench, marked by wooden stakes and string. But it was hers. She ran her fingers over the rough edge of the brick. Eli, now 9 months old, gurgled from his stroller. His cheeks were pink from the sun, his little fingers wrapped around a plastic wrench from a donated toy set. Emma crouched beside him. "That's yours too," she whispered. "You're the first boy to ever own something on this land." The fire came 2 weeks later. Not literal, not yet. It was a city council meeting. She stood at a folding podium in a crowded basement hall with sweat down her back and fear in her throat. Across from her, a row of suited men and one bored-looking woman glanced at their papers. "You're proposing we fund a housing project run by a woman with no construction company, no formal license, and a baby on her hip." That was the question, delivered without malice, but with enough condescension to silence most rooms. Emma didn't flinch. "Yes," she said, "because I'm not building walls. I'm building futures. And that baby on my hip, he's the reason it will work." She showed them the math, the solar savings, the impact on crime rates, the psychological safety created by shared childcare spaces. She ended with, "You keep saying these neighborhoods are broken. Maybe what they need isn't more surveillance. Maybe they need a place to come home to." There was silence, then murmurs, then clapping. A week later, the city awarded her a community impact grant for $250. Northern that night, she and Sister Ray sat on folding chairs beside the worksite. Eli crawled across a blanket between them, giggling as he chased a flashlight beam. Ray passed her a thermos of wine. "You're not just surviving. You're rewriting the whole damn ending." Emma blinked hard, staring at the earth she was claiming. "I just don't want anyone else to feel what I felt the night he walked away." Ray's voice was quiet. "Then keep building." The fire did come. A real one, 6 weeks into construction. Someone broke into the temporary tool shed, set fire to the insulation rolls. The damage was small, but the message was clear. Don't build here. The next morning, Emma showed up with a hammer. No press release. No police statement. No tears. She walked the site, swept ash from the edges, and poured the first bag of concrete herself. A few volunteers from the neighborhood came out. Then a church group. Then Melissa, with a delivery of insulation. By dusk, the fire's scar was gone. In its place, Mercy's first wall. Eli took his first step that day, right into her arms. Covered in dust, crying tears she didn't have time to wipe. 3 months later, Hearthlight Village opened its first 2 homes. Local press came, so did donors, and women tired. Brave women clutching babies and paperwork, staring at the porch steps like they couldn't believe it was real. Emma handed the first set of keys to a mother named Janelle. "Welcome home," she said, tears brimming. Janelle cried so hard she couldn't speak. Eli babbled from her hip, chewing a corner of Emma's badge. "He's gonna know," Emma whispered. "That love built this. That love can rebuild anything." As the sun dipped behind the first completed roof, Emma stood barefoot in the clay, Eli on her hip, and whispered, "We did it, baby. From ashes to home. From goodbye to foundation." Chapter 7. Love's Unwelcome Return. It was supposed to be a quiet Monday. The summer heat had just begun to settle, and Emma was in her modest office at Hearthlight, a converted shipping container with plants in the windows and blueprints rolled neatly in the corner. Eli, now toddling, was coloring beside her or trying to. Mostly, he was chewing a crayon. "Green's not food, buddy," she murmured, smiling, not looking up. A soft knock sounded on the metal door. "Come in." The door creaked open, and everything stopped. Julian West, in a crisp black suit, and that same smug, expensive watch stood on the threshold like a ghost who'd never apologized. Emma. She didn't stand. She didn't smile. She didn't flinch. Just looked him in the eye and said, "You're late." He stepped in slowly, looking around like he couldn't quite believe this world was real. The container office, the sound of kids laughing from the daycare pod, the warmth of something built instead of bought. Emma gestured to a chair. "You're here." "Why?" Julian sat down. He looked thinner, sharper in the wrong ways. "I saw the feature on Channel 9. Sem. Single mother builds village from scratch. You made national headlines." She waited. He didn't continue. "So you thought." "What that I needed. Your congratulations." Julian ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "No, I needed to see it. You, him." He glanced at Eli, who stared at him with wary curiosity. Julian cleared his throat. "I want to be part of his life." Emma stood slowly, not angry. "Just still. You didn't want to be part of mine when he was nothing but a heartbeat." "What changed?" Julian exhaled. "The company's in trouble. My board's looking for impact partners. Investors want sustainability. You're everywhere. Forbes, morning shows. And he hesitated. "I guess I started wondering if maybe I misjudged what mattered." Emma folded her arms. "You want a role in our lives or a stake in my company?" Julian's eyes flashed with something like offense. "That's not fair." Neither was writing off a child because his mother didn't fit your branding. He looked away. Silence. Then a whisper. "I didn't know he'd change everything." Emma's voice sharpened. "He didn't." "I did." Eli toddled over, reaching up toward Emma's legs. She lifted him instinctively, his little arms wrapping around her neck. Julian stared. There was hunger in his eyes now, not lust, not ambition. "Loss. What's his name?" he asked. "Eli." Julian blinked. "Biblical. My mother would have liked that." Emma didn't answer. He tried again. "Can I at least see him once in a while? I could set up a fund, help support. We're not a charity case." Her voice was a whisper now, but it cut deeper than any shout. "You can't just show up when the world starts clapping for me. You don't get credit for what you abandoned." Julian swallowed hard. "He has my eyes." Emma looked at her son, cradled close, then back at the man who'd left her alone in a storm of silence and betrayal. "That's all he has of you." She walked to the door, held it open. "Leave your card. If he wants to know you one day, I'll let him decide. But you don't get to rewrite the beginning." Julian stood, hesitated. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "I see it now." Emma nodded. "That's a start. But I'm too busy building our future to keep revisiting your regrets." He left without another word. That night, Melissa found her sitting outside the container, staring at the city skyline from a plastic lawn chair. "Eli asleep on her chest?" He came. "Didn't he?" Emma nodded. Melissa didn't ask what was said. Instead, she passed her a warm mug of tea and whispered, "It's easy to fall in love with potential. Harder to choose peace." Emma kissed Eli's curls and whispered, "The only man I trust to stay is the one who crawled through drywall just to reach me." Chapter 8. The woman the city couldn't ignore. Some names are whispered, some are cursed, and some, like Emma Carter's, begin to echo. It started small. An op-ed, then a podcast, then a Tuesday morning call from City Hall. "The mayor wants to meet," Melissa said, phone shaking in her hand. "They're asking if you'd speak on affordable housing policy next month." "At the state chamber." Emma didn't blink, just nodded slowly, arms full of blueprints and toddler laundry. "Tell them yes, and ask if I can bring my son." Mayor Ramirez was nothing like Emma expected. Younger, sharper, a black Latina woman who knew what it was to be underestimated. She met Emma in her office, sunlight pouring in through a skylight. City plans pinned behind her. "You've made my staff very uncomfortable," Ramirez said with a smirk. "In a good way," Emma smiled. "I'm not here to make friends." "Good," the mayor said, motioning for her to sit. "Because I need your voice." That meeting became 4, then 7, then a public task force with Emma at its helm. Community First Housing Initiative. Her blueprint adapted into city policy. Every night, she came home to hearthlight, dirt still on her boots, arms aching from holding Eli. He was saying full words now. "Mama, home, mine." Every time he reached for her with those sturdy arms, she remembered the night she slept on a friend's floor. 1 month pregnant, eating dollar store noodles and wondering how she would keep breathing. She didn't set out to be a symbol, but symbols find those who have survived the impossible. The press started calling, from abandoned to architect. The village mama who's changing Chicago. Emma Carter, one woman, one blueprint, one future. She never hired a PR firm. She let her story breathe through truth, told the world exactly what had been done to her, what she did next, and how she did it, with a baby in one arm and a hammer in the other. The day she appeared on Good Morning America, she wore a navy blue blazer from the thrift store, ironed within an inch of its life. Eli sat in her lap, wiggling, grinning. The host smiled. "Emma, what do you say to women watching who feel forgotten, who've been told they're too late, too broken, or too tired?" Emma took a breath. "I say this," she said softly. "You are not too late. Your life isn't over. It's just under renovation." In the weeks after, Hearthlight's inbox exploded. Emails from Detroit, from Atlanta, from single mothers in Bakersfield and rural Montana, from policy advisors in D.C. "We want what you built." Mayor Ramirez invited her to co-author new zoning laws. "They'll fight you," she warned. "They'll say, a woman like you doesn't belong in those chambers." Emma just smiled. "Let them. I'll wear boots and bring blueprints." Meanwhile, Hearthlight Village expanded. 2 more houses, a community garden, a child care pod named after Sister Ray, who wept. The day they unveiled the plaque, Julian sent a check. Emma returned it with a note. "You don't get to buy redemption." That fall, the city council passed her bill, unanimously, a policy written by a woman who once couldn't afford bus fare. Later, as she held Eli in the community garden now lush with tomatoes, basil, and chalk drawings, she whispered, "They see us now, but more importantly, we see each other." She kissed Eli's head and said, "One day, you'll walk into rooms I built and never know they once tried to keep us out." Chapter 9. The father at the gate. Some ghosts don't haunt. They wait, quiet, watching, hoping for a moment to knock and be forgiven. Julian West stood outside the painted iron gate of Hearthlight Village, dressed in charcoal wool, hair thinner, posture humbler. In his hand was a children's book, the same one Emma once read aloud while she was pregnant, the one he mocked as sentimental nonsense. In his eyes, the storm of a man who's finally realized what he let die. He didn't buzz the gate. He just stood there until a child's voice cut through the breeze. "Mamie, there's a man at the fence." Emma stepped onto the porch. One look, one breath, one name she didn't say. Julian didn't wave. He bowed his head, just enough to be small. "I'm not here to take. I'm just hoping you'll let me give something back." Emma said nothing, then opened the gate, only enough to step outside, not enough to let him in. They walked the perimeter. The garden glowed gold in the late afternoon sun. Laughter bubbled from the play area. A baby shrieked happily as a plastic car bumped across the gravel. Emma didn't offer small talk. Julian finally broke the silence. "He looks like me, but his spirit," his voice cracked. "That's you. All you." She nodded once. He handed her the book. "I've been carrying this for a year, waiting for the right moment." Emma looked at the cover. The tallest tree in the forest. The story of a tree that grew through storms because it had roots no one saw. Why now? She asked quietly. Julian's answer was slow. Because I'm no longer trying to fix my reputation. I just want him to know I exist, that I regret it, all of it. Emma looked back toward the porch. Ellie sat on the steps, barefoot, juice box in hand, watching. He doesn't know you, she said. He's not missing you. He's whole. Julian's throat worked like he'd swallowed something sharp. I'm not here to claim fatherhood, just to show him I'm human. She let him walk to the porch. Eli squinted up. Who's that? Mama. Emma knelt beside him. That's Julian. He helped me build you, but then he left. Eli blinked. Why? Emma didn't flinch. Because he was scared. And because some people don't know how to stay until it's too late. Julian knelt too, a good 6 feet away. Hi, Ellie, he said. Voice quiet, unsure. You don't have to talk to me. I just wanted to see you smile in real life. Eli studied him, took a long sip from his juice box. Do you build stuff? He asked finally. Julian laughed softly, surprised. Not the way your mama does. Eli nodded. Then you can watch, but only from the bench. Mama says, people gotta earn trust slow. Emma's chest tightened, but she said nothing. That evening, Sister Ray found Emma in the office, staring at the book Julian left. He looked broken? Ray asked. He looked human. Ray nodded. Doesn't mean he gets a seat at the table. Not yet. Emma traced the book's spine. But maybe he gets a chair near the window. A week later, a journalist asked, would you call this a redemption story? Emma shook her head. No, this is a reclamation story. That night, Eli placed the book on his shelf beside the hammer Melissa gave him. Can I tell him one thing next time? He asked. Emma smiled. Sure. Baby, what? That I'm already loved, just so he knows he's late. And with that, the boy closed the gate. Not in anger, not in hate, but in understanding. Some doors don't slam. They simply don't open all the way. Chapter 10. The blueprint of her name. Emma never wanted to be a brand. She only wanted to be heard. And now they built campuses around her words. It began with a letter from a professor at the University of Chicago. We're teaching your housing model this semester. Would you come speak? Emma almost didn't go, not because she didn't care, but because Eli had a cold, because Hearthlight needed plumbing repairs, because she still hated microphones and rooms with too much glass. But she went because once she was the girl sitting in the last row, wondering if she'd ever matter to anyone again. The lecture hall was packed. Students, journalists, architects, politicians hiding behind notepads. Professor Langley introduced her. Today's speaker needs no title, just her name, Emma Carter, the woman who made policy bleed, then heal. Emma stepped up, jeans and boots, a button-down rolled to her elbows. She carried no slideshow, just her hands. And her story. I was never meant to stand here. I was supposed to disappear. She spoke for 27 minutes about love that fails you, about babies born into silence, about plaster dust and eviction notices, about the day she realized no one was coming to save her, and that maybe that was the moment she started saving herself. I built Hearthlight with a baby on my hip, not to be noble, but because nobody else would. And I didn't need permission. A student raised her hand. How did you know what to do? Emma smiled. I didn't. I just kept doing the next right thing. Then the next. That's what rebuilding looks like. When she left the stage, she was met with a standing ovation. But what she remembered most, the girl in the second row, silently crying, and the way that girl mouthed, "Thank you for surviving," in the months that followed. Hearthlight became more than a model. It became a movement. Other cities called, other women built. Emma mentored them one by one, not through meetings, but through shared stories in kitchens and folding chairs. She turned down awards unless they came with funding for housing, turned down interviews unless they asked about solutions. Not her pain. She trademarked under renovation, then licensed it free to any nonprofit founded by a single mother. One snowy afternoon, Melissa visited the village, her hair fully gray now, steps slower. They sat in the office, sipping peppermint tea. You ever think about what you'd say to that man now? Melissa asked gently. Emma didn't look up. I already said it. She pointed to the blueprint on the wall, the original Hearthlight plan, water-stained, taped in the corners, still smudged with Eli's baby fingerprints. That's what I said. That spring, a reporter asked Eli, now 6, bright-eyed, taller than average, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" He didn't blink. I already am someone. And when the interviewer laughed, confused, Eli added, "My mom says names don't need to grow up. Just keep building." Closing scene. Emma walked through Hearthlight at dusk, each light flickering on like a heartbeat. A mother waved from the community garden. A boy ran barefoot down the gravel path. Eli's laughter rang from the open kitchen window. She paused beneath the archway, engraved with a simple line, built by hands that were never meant to shake. Emma Carter's name wasn't carved in marble. It was whispered through hallways, passed from one woman to the next, not because she was perfect, but because she never left the blueprint behind. Maybe you didn't expect her to win. Maybe you thought she'd fade, disappear, like so many women do when they're left carrying someone else's broken promise. But she didn't. She stayed. She built. She loved a child into wholeness. She poured her grief into policy. She turned plaster and pain into walls that held other women upright. Emma Carter was never the loudest voice in the room, but her silence built villages. Her absence from certain headlines was not a failure. It was a choice to write her story in blueprints instead of press releases, to let her name echo in the hearts of those who needed her most. You didn't see her on red carpets. You saw her in courtrooms, in neighborhood meetings, in the dirt with a hammer. In the headlines, she never chased, and the homes she never left unfinished. And Julian, he faded, the way the past does, when you stop needing it to explain who you are now. Eli grew into his own name, not his father's legacy, not his mother's wounds, just himself. Strong, bright, whole. And if you ask what this story is really about, it's not about revenge. It's not about the man who left. It's about the woman who stayed, with a baby on her hip and a map in her soul and a future only she could see. So maybe tonight, before you sleep, you remember this. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are under renovation, and the blueprint of your life is still unfolding, just like hers did. If this story moved you, the next one goes even deeper. See you there. And if you ever feel forgotten, just come back to Hearthlight. We left the porch light on for you.